Hey friends, this episode of the podcast is with Dr. Anthony Balduzzi. He runs the Fit Father Project. He is concerned with helping men over the age of 40 age well, particularly fathers, men who are busy as hell. How do you take care of your health? How do you do nutrition, exercise, and all the other things while being an active and involved father? Since the last time he came on my show in 2020, I've become a father. He's become a father. We don't talk necessarily about fatherhood much on this episode, but we do talk about how does one take care of oneself so that one ages well, ages gracefully. We touch on exercise and how to adapt your exercise as you get older. We talk about diet and the importance of eating well and how no amount of exercise can compensate for a bad diet. And uh, Anthony shares his own personal diet with us and how he eats and how he flows through his day, the things that he eats, the things he doesn't eat. And I share a little bit about my own stuff. We also touch on circadian rhythms and how to kick off your circadian rhythm, how important it is in your daily cycle and in affecting your sleep. We talk about blue light, red light, UV light, infrared light, red light machines, and how to engage all of those things in an optimal way. This conversation is very rich for one that was less than an hour long, and I always enjoy having Dr. Balduzzi on the show and having conversations with him. I feel like this kind of set the tone for me for the next few years on like where I need to brush up, where I need to keep up, and where I need to adapt. Certainly for me, stretching needs to be more a part of my routine because he emphasized that need to increase the amount that you stretch as you get older. And towards the end of the episode, we even talk about gene therapy and like immortality and what science is. What does Dr. Balduzzi think about advances in science and the prospect of living to 200 years old, let's say. Definitely some conversation in here around how to flow with the seasons, how to adapt your exercise and your diet to summer season versus winter season. And we talk about vitamin D supplementation, K2, even some dosage recommendations in here. So, really stoked to share this one with you guys, as always. And on my end of things, I am taking the summer off from working with men on relationships, but we have a launch date for the fall for the Conscious Relationship Council. The launch date is September 14th. We'll be running another 12-week live relationship training for men. This is something that we take guys through to help them learn the skills and techniques required for relationship mastery and to help them change their negative patterns and discover how to thrive in relationship rather than what can often feel like drowning or struggling just to make it work or just to be happy. I really passionately believe that every man needs to take some time in his life to look at his relationship patterns and understand how he can shift those and pick up some tools that he can take into his relationship, because the absence of that means whatever was taught to us unconsciously, whatever we saw around us as a kid, and whatever patterns we picked up in our late teens and our early 20s in how to be in relationship is kind of in one way or another the same pattern that we run as we get older. And it takes conscious effort to sort of get into there, get into the dirt, dig into our unconscious and find out what patterns we need to shed, how to get rid of them, and how to adapt how we're showing up in relationship. It's very hard to work against those patterns that are so ground in, but it's not impossible. It takes a circle of accountability, a structure, and exerted effort across time. And we have put together a program that really works for guys. We've got great testimonials. So check out the Conscious Relationship Council. That's on my website. And if you are listening to this, please share it with people who might resonate, someone who might get something out of this episode. And if you're watching, of course, please like, subscribe, comment, ask questions. And at the end of this episode, we actually talk about EMF and something that Dr. Balduzzi is really passionate about. And we don't really open the door to talking about it, but he shares that there's a whole other conversation that he wants to have around EMFs and what he's discovered about their effects on the body, and wants to come back for another episode to discuss that. So if that's something that's interesting for you, send a message, drop a comment, let me know that that's something that's interesting, and we'll talk about it. Okay, folks, until next time, enjoy this episode with Dr. Balduzzi. All right, I'm here with Dr. Anthony Balduzzi. Episode 2, brother. Good to have you on the show.
Happy to be here, bro. Thanks for having me back.
I just had a look back at our last episode. It was September 2020. And so I guess we're coming up on 3 years since you came on. We talked about men's health, hormones, longevity. I remember us talking about nose breathing, which is kind of making me self-conscious right now because I'm not breathing through my nose because I have allergies at the moment. But yeah, great conversation talking about testosterone and dispelling some myths and just normalizing, keeping an eye on your testosterone as you age and knowing that it drops, and that, and talking about the natural things that you can do to boost your testosterone, and then supplements, etc. And that was a great conversation. If folks want to listen to that, it's still out there. It's episode 49. And you're looking younger, I have to say. You're looking younger than 3 years ago. I feel like I'm older. I'm looking older. Recently had a baby, so there's some lost sleep and some extra weight on my shoulders, so to speak. But I'd love that to be a little bit of the backdrop of this conversation. Is,
For sure.
You know, we're celebrating my birthday this weekend. I'm turning 39, so I'm on the cusp of 40. And you know, you're the guy to talk to about how to age well. You know, you've got the Fit Father Project. As I recall, when you told your story on the show last time, you lost your father at an early age. Mm-hmm. You saw that his death was largely due to a lack of dealing with his health, taking care of his health. And that got you into bodybuilding, exercise, personal training, medical school, and then founding the Fit Father Project to try to help dads get
Nailed
healthy,
it.
stay healthy.
Well, you still have a mind like a steel trap, bro. So despite the low sleep, I mean, that's my story in a nutshell. And I'll add this too. I have like a 15-month-old daughter now too. So we are in the throes of it as well. So this is very relevant.
We're on the same path. Well, I think coffee and chocolate, my personal medications for any memory that I still have. So great, man. Good to have you here. Good to talk about this. So I assume there's two pieces to taking care of your body from a macro perspective: exercise and diet. Mm-hmm. And perhaps we could touch on each of those subjects. Yeah. And really speak to the guys who seem to be around me lately, which is, guys who are approaching their 40s or in their 40s, and they're busy. They're financially successful. A lot of them. Mm-hmm. A lot of them are fathers. They don't have a lot of time. And one of the fears that I had about becoming a father was that when I was a kid and a teenager, I looked at the dads around me, and they all had these pot bellies, and they didn't look particularly healthy. And they didn't even look that happy because of that. Mm-hmm. You know, they were kind of dragging themselves around. I thought, okay, that's fatherhood. That's what it means to get older. And I don't want to do that. I want to stay young forever. And so maybe just don't have kids. And that was my mindset in my 20s. And so Is there another way? How do we do it?
Yeah, I mean, the answer is absolutely. I think like in the advent of social media and the internet, we can definitely see some models of guys who are maintaining a high level of fitness and performance, as well as running businesses and having families. It does require a certain amount of discipline and certain habits in place because the current current of our culture is leading us. If we do nothing, we're in this field of you are going to drift into overweight, medications, depressed. So we need to have things to guide us the other way. And you mentioned two of the categories, nutrition and exercise. I'll add the third leg that I think is relevant, which is circadian rhythm management. And
Mm,
ultimately, these three things together are going to give you health, energy, performance. They're going to help you manage your nervous system, which I know you've spoken about recently on the podcast. So let's dive into
yeah.
any of those topics as it relates to creating like a sustainable performance routine for busy guys who may or may not be dads. But especially when you have added pressures of having a family, it's like the stakes are even higher, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Well, I'm most interested in circadian rhythm, but let's touch on that last. Let's go
Okay.
quickly into exercise and diet and you know, with a particular focus on I notice I have a tendency to work out like I'm 18.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I go into the gym or when I go to do my routine, I'm doing stuff that I used to do in many ways. Like I've adapted a little bit over the years, but I see that in other men too, where it's like they're doing the same exercises, the same workouts in the same ways that they were when they were younger, maybe just scaled down a bit.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if that's healthy, smart, or whether we should be adapting our exercise as we move through the decades.
For sure. Well, I mean, I'll say this like in the 40 plus category, like the training needs to be adapted through the lens of helping improve mobility and reduce injuries. Like the one thing that definitively changes as we get older is our recovery capacity goes down. And oftentimes we accumulate joint, soft tissue injuries. The tendons aren't as resilient, ligaments aren't as resilient. So the training needs to be smarter. And there's small tweaks that can be made. So maybe instead of doing the heavy barbell bench press, we're moving to more of like a dumbbells with slightly easier, more favorable angles. But the fact is, like, if you were a guy that strength trained heavily in your teens and 20s, and that's a routine for you, please maintain that. I mean, we
Uh,
know one of the greatest fountains of youth is high intensity resistance training. And that means like heavy loads, but also stuff that becomes a little more metabolically taxing. And the way we teach guys, that's maybe a little different is there's like the bro splits of bodybuilding that many guys did, like the chest day, you do 15, 20 sets of chest. Like that stuff just becomes less relevant and important as we get older. And I'm a bigger fan of doing more full body training a couple times per week. It's like easier on your schedule, one, but two, there's a concept in training of effective volume, meaning the number of sets you do in a given training session that gives you the biggest bang for your buck.
yeah.
And the point of exercise is to stimulate, not like annihilate. So once we initiate the protein synthesis, once we, get a lot of tension in the muscles, like we get out and we go recover. So imagine taking that 15 sets of the chest volume and spreading that out 2 to 3 days a week. You're actually going to get a greater benefit. You get these smaller pulses of anabolic windows, and it doesn't take as much time. Now, I think there's three types of exercise that we really need to be good at as we get older. It's like strength. We need to have the muscle and ability to like move, load, and create tension. Cardiovascular fitness, because we have this heart, and the main reason that guys die is cardiovascular health. And then flexibility and mobility, because ultimately when you're 60 and 70 and 80, the quality of your life is dictated by how good does your back feel. Do you have like joint issues with your knees or your shoulders? So your training needs to be kind of like guided between those three variables. And this is why the workouts that we design for our guys, and you can also find them on our YouTube channel, are like integrative. They incorporate all three of those things into a session. So a CrossFit type workout is like similar to that. It's metabolic resistance training where guys are getting cardio plus foundational strength training movements that are functional. But there's a lot of dumb stuff that guys do, like jumping off high things, swinging like crazy, maybe not even paying attention to the kind of recovery capacities, or doing too high intensity. That's unnecessary. But
Right.
I'll tell you this, like you need to get good at swinging your hips, doing deadlifts and swings. You need to be good at pressing things overhead, shoulder presses, pulling things into your body, rows, pushing things away from your body, bench press. So I think the mindset shift is there are foundational movements we need to be strong at as we age. It's the way the body moves in space. We need to load those and train those. And then also understand that we have a full physical history from stuff that we've accumulated in terms of injuries. And I'm one of those guys, and you need to find a way to work around those things without derailing you. And then with a high intensity exercise is like part of it. And I think it's good to slot that in like 2-3 times a week, maybe more if you love it and it's something that's really integrated into your life. But equally important in that exercise domain is daily activity. Like the longest living people on the planet, they don't do P90X. Like the centenarians, like they're walking, they're active, they're accumulating steps, they're ideally getting into the sunshine, they're breathing through their nose. All those things are so relevant. So if you're like a time strapped dad like you right now, not getting a lot of sleep, nervous system is kind of taxed. Sure, you could chug a black coffee and go get another high intensity workout. But in this season of your life, is that the thing that your nervous system really needs? I would posit no. I would posit that it's probably better for you to find a way to get a quick recharge on some meditation or a nap and get outside and walk, something to tonify your nervous system. So this is maybe the lesson, whether or not someone has young kids, is we're always checking in as guys who want to perform well. What is the state of my nervous system? Over time, introducing high intensity activity, pulsing that is going to make a more resilient nervous system. But in the short term, if you're in a stretch of depletion or a stretch that's like really demanding, doing more restorative exercise is actually better. It'd be better for you right now to stretch in an infrared sauna than it would be for you probably to lift high intensity weights that'll tax your nervous system.
That feels really good to hear. I've seen some stuff recently that's like, you can be a super dad. You need to get up at 4 a.m. Go get it. You got to do it for your kids. Do it for your family. And if you don't, you're a loser. You're a bad dad. Like, you got to really give her, man. Don't give me the excuses, you know? And there's all these people saying like, hey man, that's not sustainable. Like, yeah, anybody can sprint, but like dads are already at the edge. And that attitude is very kind of like 20-year-old bro,
for sure,
you know, who like can hyper focus on this one thing and just make his, you know, you when you were 20, just like boom, bodybuilding. Yeah, I'm going to do 25 sets on my back today. Right. So this idea of blending different exercises, high intensity, low intensity, integrating flexibility, and that last piece that you hit on around tuning into your nervous system and asking yourself what you need is very, I don't know. I like the masculine archetypes. I like to kind of look at the warrior, the lover, the magician, and the king, and like this very sort of kingly. It's like, okay, just really grounding in and listening. What do I need right now? Do I need the warrior? Do I need to bring the lover to myself? Right. It's a mature way to look at your body and to listen. So I love that. What did you mean by metabolically taxing? I just want to get clear on what you meant by
maybe
that.
I was specifically saying more on the nervous system taxing. So when we lift a heavy load and we initiate the nervous system, the nerves in the brain needs to fire to those motor units in the muscles to get them to contract at a very high level. Like that is taxing. It's somewhat depleting. Now the benefit we get from going into the arena in the warrior and kicking ass with a high intensity workout is it can make us more resilient and it causes a lot of powerful adaptation afterwards. But the thing is, there are ways to get exercise that are more gentle than other ways. So I guess I was just basically saying it was more on a central nervous system taxing than metabolically taxing. I'll say this: high intensity exercise, pulse a few times per week, is one of the greatest things you can do for your metabolism. Makes you more insulin sensitive. Those carbs you eat afterwards, you process them so much better. Like it's just good. The mitochondria that ultimately are the basis of your ability to have longevity, they are stimulated by high intensity exercise. So I think of those as pulses, and then think of the rest of it as like maintaining a parasympathetic nervous system as much as you can. And parasympathetic nervous system is going to be through your outdoor walking, your breathing, your sauna, prayer, meditation practice, spending time with your family. So we want to be in that state 90% of the time, and we want to be in the geared up state 10% of the time. And pulsing it is a really good idea, but it doesn't need to be necessarily all the time. And I think the king is a great analogy, right? Because the king is not looking at just trying to win one given battle. Like that's a young man's game, looking at winning the war. And you got to have the vision for that. So understand that there's reasons and seasons for all periods of our lives. There's going to be some times where you have the space in your life and the bandwidth to really crush it. There's other times where you're not going to have the bandwidth and you need to scale back on that a little bit. And this is where nutrition is the through line. And it's a nice pivot into this. Not that we can continue speaking exercise, but
Yeah, let's go.
nutrition is always the baseline that can be maintained, no matter if you're wartime or peaceful time. It is your through line. It's the thing that gives you more energy. It's the thing that keeps your digestion on track. It's the thing that keeps your habits on track. And there really is no good reason to let that slip. Like that is the thing that actually could be your backboard in all times, especially during times where you may not be able to exercise as hard and as fast as you'd like to. Nutrition maintains your body composition more than anything. Like, I mean, you said I look kind of fit and healthy right now. Like I'm probably training twice a week. You know, I have a young daughter too, and I'm running businesses. So it's like, but I am eating like 95% good. And I know these are two levers. Not to say that you can out exercise a bad diet, but if I'm pushing hard in the training, of course I have more leeway to eat a little more stuff. It's just facts. But if your training is pulling down, then nutrition better be on point, because that's going to be your source of energy and resilience.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. When I was in my 20s, like all the way up until I was about 28, I trained hard and I was a beefcake. I'm 5'8", but I was like wide, and I weighed 155 pounds, but I could bench press 305. Just
Dang.
like just bulky little
Yeah.
dude, you know? But I don't think I could ever see my abs between age 17 when I kind of bulked up, or 16 when I bulked up, when I went to rehab. I don't think I lost this sort of layer of fat over my abs until I was 28, read The 4-Hour Body by Tim Ferriss,
Yeah.
and decided, oh, I'm going to try a diet. Like, what would it be like to run an experiment on my body in terms of what food I'm putting in? Up until that point, it was like bagels with cream cheese in the morning, lots of cream in my coffee, lots of sugar, 5-cent candies whenever I wanted them. Like I was still eating like a young fella. So, and that did change so much for me. Changing my diet, keeping my exercise routine the same. All of a sudden I lost this layer of fat. I could see my abs and I felt really good. My energy system cleaned up. I felt sharper in my mind. So how do you eat? Tell me, like, when you're eating well, 95% of the time, what does that look like? What are you eating and when?
Awesome question. I'll get into the specifics. I want to kind of do one philosophical like entry point into that. Like the margin for error as we get older goes down. We talked about that a little bit with exercise, the joints, the metabolism, all those things. Nutrition, it's the same way. You just can't get away with as much. And even the bigger thing is like what you do in your late 30s to 40s is going to show up 10 years later in your 50s and your 60s. Like the plaque that kills people in their hearts and the metabolic dysfunction, it doesn't just happen overnight. It is laid down in layers of inflammation. Our immune system, right, that is constantly scouting for pathogens, viruses, bacteria, as well as cancer cells, naturally weakens with age. It's called senescence. It gets worse. So if you are constantly throwing high sugars in the body, you may be okay with like not looking your best. You may be okay with carrying a few extra pounds, but understand that those choices are literally kind of paving the future path of like health and being around. And what happens if you don't address that stuff? It's prescription medications. It's getting more dependent on external things. It's a greater inroad into your nervous system because you don't have natural energy and you're propping it up constantly with stimulants. Again, new dads, I'm not knocking the coffee. It's important to a certain extent, but I'm talking over the long haul, right? Yeah. So nutrition is so foundational. And again, how clear our minds are and how much energy we have is largely determined by what we're eating. We know after we have a shit meal and their stomach is like hurting and bloated, we want to fall asleep. And it's like, that is what we're doing. And then we're just counteracting that stuff with stimulants. So imagine waking up and feeling so much more energized. And that comes down to easy to digest foods, water, and all this stuff. So we'll kind of get into a day in my life and what I think is important. So when I wake up, which I try to keep like fairly consistent, but I'll be honest with you, I think there's even seasonal fluctuations. Like now that it's summer and it doesn't sunset for like, what time is it sunset near you? Like 7:30, like 8:00.
Yeah.
Like,
it's like between 8 and 9, right?
Right.
It's
That's crazy.
To 9:30 now.
Okay. So do you find yourself staying up a little later now or not necessarily?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm up till 12:30 and it's like my aura ring is like, hey, dude, cut it out. Go to bed earlier.
Okay, so that's part of it, but I also bring that up to say that I think there is like good health is largely going to be when we're entrained with the natural circadian rhythms and fluxes. So I don't think it's a bad idea you're staying up a little later. I'm doing that naturally, but point being is you still want a certain amount of good sleep before midnight. But either way,
Yeah.
like get up at a fairly consistent time. The first thing I think about in the morning is getting like proper rehydration with minerals. So
Right.
like minerals are like the overlooked aspect of this whole health game because we're always focused on the macros, the proteins, carbs, and fats. And we hear about vitamins and like those are good. But like minerals are really like these metals that come from the earth's crust that are constituted into our bodies. Like our bones are made of calcium and other things like this. And then the minerals like sodium, potassium, chloride, and all the trace minerals are literally how our cells electrically communicate. Like we
Mm.
basically pass minerals across a cell's border, and that's how electricity gradients happen, and that's how our nerves conduct. They just pass minerals. So we need to get more of these into our bodies first thing in the morning. So I specifically drink around 20 to 32 ounces of water in the morning, and I throw some straight up sea salt into the water. So like Celtic
Okay.
sea salt, pink Himalayan sea salt's cool too, trace mineral drops, but like I get my mineral game early in the morning with hydration because that's what our bodies need for energy. We all know we've heard about fasting is quite good. If you hydrate and mineralize, you could like go for a while without food. And you'll find oftentimes that it's best for some people not to eat first thing in the morning. So for me, I don't eat first thing in the morning, but I kind of play it by ear. Some mornings, if I feel like eating, I'll wait a couple hours, 2, 3 hours, and I'll do a little bit of activity in the morning to prime and wake up the system. So I think the morning time, if you have the benefit to, is the perfect time to get outside, get some sunshine. And now we're going to get into this deep, like when possible, morning sunshine in the morning is one of the greatest things for entraining your circadian rhythm and helping everything. So the sun, as it's rising, is kicking off all this near infrared radiation, this infrared light, the same kind of stuff that people hop in saunas for. The sun is kicking that out. It's about 50% of sunlight that goes into your eyes, and it starts to make it so your brain is producing serotonin. And serotonin makes us feel good. It's what people take all the drugs for when they're depressed. So like the natural pharmacy is getting connected to circadian rhythm in the morning, as well as getting the hydration, not necessarily having food. Now, my first meal of the day, whenever I do have it, maybe fasted, maybe earlier in the morning, is always something that's easy to digest. Because I am lean and I'm insulin sensitive, I do have fruit in the morning. This is
Mm.
something that I think is beneficial. So certain kinds of fruits are fantastic because they have all these vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, but they also have fiber. And this kind of plant-based fiber is so good for our digestive tract. And it's one of the best things, in my opinion, to put into the body first thing in the morning when the stomach is empty. So
Yeah.
it might be a mono fruit meal, some kind of berries. If I am training or I had trained the day before, it might be a more sugary fruit like mangoes, could be melons someday, cantaloupe, like whatever. It could be some more green tip bananas for some of the fiber, but I will have a mono fruit meal in the morning. And I guess this flies in the face of some people who are like strict keto. My kind of take on it is I am like only choosing very natural, non-processed carbs. Don't do many starchy carbs, but I'm definitely not afraid of having some fruit in the morning to
Right.
wake my GI tract up and give me a good, healthy poop. So I'll do
Okay.
that. And then I will have either some protein source plus fats after about 20, 30 minutes after that. It often looks like 3 to 6 eggs, like high quality eggs. I'm a huge believer in getting high quality egg yolks. We know that the story between eggs and cholesterol is kind of like debunked. It can actually improve cholesterol patterns. It gives you that choline, which is good for your brain. And it's a super great protein source with a lot of vitamins. So I'm a huge fan of eggs in the morning or a power protein smoothie of some sort. And I'll use some plant-based protein powder. I'll throw in hemp seeds, chia seeds, maybe some cacao, maybe some spring mix and just like some almond milk or something like that. Blend that sucker up. I
Yeah.
think it's good for guys not to do a meal that jacks up your blood sugar too much or that is too hard to digest. Early in the morning, you want your GI tract to be like light. And I think this is something that people need to realize is there's a constant tug of war happening between your GI tract and your brain for blood flow. When you have a huge meal and you feel exhausted afterwards, it's because your body is literally shunting all the blood to your GI tract to break down heavy and intense, hard to break down foods. So don't do that in the morning. That's like a later thing in the day. So I'll
Yeah.
have a lighter meal. I'll
That makes
pause there.
sense. It makes sense. Like there have been times where I've scheduled a meeting or I've scheduled a task where I'm like, oh yeah, I've got to sit down. I've got to bang off the rest of my emails before dinner because we're traveling tomorrow or something. It's very hard to do because dinner tends to be, like heavier carbs. Maybe we have
Mm-hmm.
steak or there's usually a heavier protein, more protein intake. That's for sure. Meat.
Mm-hmm.
And I eat big at dinner and sometimes there's even a dessert. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And sitting down to use my brain after that, see, it always feels
Yeah.
impossible. I sometimes give up.
Yep.
So that does make so much sense around just blood flow. Like the brain is just wants to be switched off after a big meal like that.
Yeah, and you want a lot of nutrients. So like I think like these easy to digest nutrient rich foods are your tool to like sync up with your productive work blocks. So like shakes, power
Right.
smoothies, like great. Like high quality fresh pressed juices can be good too. Eggs are very easy for people to digest.
Right.
Fruits are very easy for people to digest. And quite frankly, a lot of people do still feel fine with like a carnivore keto style breakfast where they have a lot of grass-fed steak or ground beef or things like or bacon. And like that's totally good to go. I'd say just chew your food like crazy. Another kind of
Right.
habit hack that I personally believe in is when I'm having very big meals, and that could be at the end of the night, and I want to like have a quick turnaround and be able to work. I will take some digestive enzymes for some support. They're not a
Mhm.
cure all, but I figure like, hey, let me give
Mhm.
them a little bit more digestive power during a time when I have a really big meal. And now fast forward to the end of the day is I do have that nice sit down dinner that has a bigger portion of some high quality protein. It is often animal foods, but it's of the highest quality that I can get. It could be a grass fed steak. It could be wild salmon and things like this. Sometimes I even do just like plant based meals. Like I have an awesome, badass, like high protein vegetarian chili with a pressure
Mhm.
cooked beans with some quinoa. That's good too. But like I'll have a high protein rich meal in the end of the day, and then in the middle, it's depending on how much exercise I'm doing. I'm only training twice per week, so I will
Yeah.
typically have like a light snack in the middle of the day, which could be like macadamia nuts, pistachios. It could be a grass fed beef stick. It could be some veggies and some other kinds of things. But it's like a light meal. I'm typically having like two discrete feedings per
Yeah.
day, a
Right.
morning and an evening, and a light afternoon thing as needed. And then if I am training more, then maybe I will have something in the middle of the day that gives me a little more calories, but I'm auto regulating based off of my activity level.
Mhm.
And that just tends to work really well for me.
You and I eat very much the same, actually.
Yeah.
I eat eggs almost every day.
Good.
We get eggs from our neighbors' chickens, which is
Hmm.
amazing. I fast in the mornings most of the time. I do a greens powder in the morning, and I
Yep.
add a little lemon and sometimes sea salt, sometimes pink salt.
Nice.
I'm curious what you think about greens powders. I know a lot of people are doing athletic greens right now. I do something called Vitamineral greens.
Yep.
And I'm just curious what your thoughts are on greens powder, particularly even in a fasted state.
Solid. I mean, it depends on what the greens powder has in it in terms of the amount of carbohydrates and what sweetener source that they use.
Yeah.
Like Athletic Greens is a solid product. I mean, they got a lot of good stuff in there, and I think the benefit of the greens powder is most of us in today's day and age are not going to eat a wide variety of different fruits and vegetables for those good phytonutrients, and you can get them all like largely in a greens powder. So I think it's good to go. Yeah, I would look at the calories in those things in terms of like a fasted thing. I mean, if we're getting like 50 to 100 calories above, like that's probably a little higher. And it means that there is some kind of sugar or fiber
Yeah.
or fat source added. That
Right.
being said, fasting is not like completely binary. It's not like you got 50 calories and then like you're out of a fasted state, but like, I would say if it has a lot of amino acids and it's like up above the 5-10 grams of protein, you're going to you want to be in a catabolic state when you're fasting. You want to be
Mhm.
like in a state where you're not stimulating insulin. There's not a lot of amino acids floating around. These are some of the triggers that actually lead to the beneficial like autophagy and the stuff that we want. So I wouldn't jack those things up, but I think Athletic Greens totally works. Green Vibrance is another product I've used before that
Okay.
is super solid. I'm sure the one you have is good too. First thing in the morning is when you need to prioritize micronutrients. So if a greens powder is part of that game for you, like I'm a big fan of that. And I think they're actually probably better than just the traditional take a multivitamin because you're getting like a wider froth of different things.
Yeah, there's seaweed and like
Yeah.
all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Vitamin greens is the ingredients are fantastic.
Nice.
Okay, so a few other questions for you. What do you think about drinking calories and um, desserts? Like, what do you do for desserts? Is there a cutoff that you give yourself in the evening?
I think I'll start with the desserts. I think it is a good idea, especially if you're when do you crave desserts? You primarily crave desserts when you're in a stressful, taxing time. There's a
Yeah,
psychological reason and there's also physiologic reason. Physiologic reason is when stress is like just generally there, the body does want added sugar. Like we crave these things more, the brain regions associated with that light up more. So for you right now, it probably feels great to have a little bit of chocolate after a meal or a little bit of frozen something or a healthier kind of version. I would say just like every person who should find a good key slotted in ingredient, or like what's your option for dessert? Like get 1 or 3 of those and make it like healthy. So like, for example, they have this no sugar added coconut ice cream bars. Like they're great. It's literally coconut. It's like no sugar. It's chocolate coated. It tastes delicious. It's like 150 calories. Yeah, I
Yeah.
could have that after every single meal and it wouldn't be any problem whatsoever. So like I know I have that. Quality organic dark chocolate, solid. Chocolate covered almonds or something like this, or macadamia nuts, solid. Square dark chocolate, a little bit of frozen fruit if that's what you kind of like. Maybe it's a coconut like yogurt, organic. Like just get something that's not full of a bunch of sugar and crap. And there are so many good options in today's day and age. So actually, Ben, I'm curious, what are some of your go-to dessert options?
Uh, yeah, sometimes we make our own ice cream, and
Nice.
so we can adjust the sugar in that. We have an ice
Yep.
cream maker. Yeah, other times I'll have some chocolate, and but sometimes there's this Unreal chocolate we've been eating lately that whenever we travel to the US, we come home with like these
Mhm.
Unreal Smarties, but they're high sugar, and I don't really like eating them because I can just feel
Yeah.
how strong it is in my system. And I also sometimes I go to people's houses or go to my parents' house or whatever, and they give fruit salad after dinner,
Way
and
too
I
much.
find
Not
that
ideal.
messes me up. Yeah,
Yeah, and
it
the
messes with
reason
my
it
dinner.
does is because like the fruit is very fast digesting. So you're literally throwing a fast digesting sugary thing on top of a slow digesting protein fat meal.
Mhm,
Like there'd
mhm.
be a massive difference if you ate the fruit bowl even like 20 to 30 minutes before dinner, allow that to clear and then have the meal afterwards. So fruit is
Yeah,
not a good thing to eat in a heavy amount after dinner. I typically don't at all. If you had a couple blueberries sprinkled on some coconut yogurt, like that'd be okay. The chocolate thing that's kind of going around the headlines now because you brought it up, and I think it is fairly relevant, is like we're going to see more people talking about our chocolate is tested for heavy metals like
right.
cadmium or lead or stuff like that. And like we are finding like green tea is a plant that sucks up a lot of heavy minerals, so you want to get quality of that. Chocolate also sucks up some of that stuff. So just it's relevant. If you're eating chocolate every day, get like a high quality chocolate. And if you want dessert in your life for your family and your kids too, you can also make some stuff. Like, man, you get some like almond butter or peanut butter with a little bit of like high quality cacao powder. People
Mhm,
have all these ball recipes. Like, I don't make them personally. That's a little bit of like work that's not a part of my routine, but like get a healthy in slot dessert and then you can have it. And it's no
mhm,
problem whatsoever. And here's what I would say is like have that like 1 or 2 pieces after or whatever it is after, and then just go brush your teeth. Start your fasting window. Like
right.
have the dessert. I had my pieces and do something that's going to create some resistance. So like go brush your teeth, clean your mouth, done to
Yeah,
go, done for the day, begin your fasting, and then reconnect with the benefits of why it's good to allow your GI tract to rest. Is the problem
mhm,
that people get into, one of them is like you have dinner and then you go again and you have something 3 or 4 hours later, like you didn't really need that thing again, that next hit at 9 or 10 p.m. at night, but you double dip, you go back. So if you can
yep,
just avoid that, now you can actually stay in a prolonged fasted period. You still got to enjoy your nice little dessert and you can restart it again tomorrow.
uh-huh, yep, good strategy. Last night was I wanted to reach for something, and I ended up getting tamari almonds, which
Mm-hmm.
I think are a better
For
option than
sure.
what I would have gone for, which is my wife, she makes 12 dozen chocolate chip cookie balls from scratch all at the same time and then rolls them up, freezes them. And so
Mm.
we can pull out 8 to 10 of them for the whole house and just cook them fresh. And then I
Mm-hmm.
end up eating 3 cookies. So that's
Nice.
when I'm being bad, that's what I'm doing, but that's still not nearly as bad as I used to be because we're controlling all of those ingredients
Yep.
and we know where they're coming from. We're not eating it from a package. Um, Drinking calories, like what's your stance on that? I mean, guys drink beer and then there's, pop and all the other stuff, which
Yeah, well, I mean, there's like no, there's no good reason. I think everyone knows this now to be drinking sugary drinks, to be
yeah.
drinking drinks that actually have just straight up like added sugar. I believe it is a different scenario if someone's getting like fresh pressed juices that have like a lot of phytonutrients in them as well. Like it's still a better idea to get more of the green juice than it would be to have like the apple juice or the orange juice based juices. Like sugar is going to have an impact on the body even from natural
Mhm.
sources, but like man, there is just no reason to be drinking sugary drinks, especially when there are a lot of like good in class, tasty beverages that are sweetened with better things now. Like whether
Mhm.
it's erythritol or whether it is stevia or monk fruit or
Yeah.
something like that. But again, I think there's an underlying current of addiction to the sugary taste in drinks. Like your main
Yeah.
drinking source should be water, herbal teas, again, coffee kind of is in that thing because it's an infusion of a plant bean, but like mostly these liquids. And if you need something, like if you need like a Zevia soda pop that's like healthy stevia sweetened, like that's a cool option, but just like not to drink calories. Now, when it comes to alcohol, like
Yeah.
the ideal for alcohol and health, like if you're really trying to be optimally healthy, is zero. And I think that's becoming more and more clear. But the ideal for alcohol and how that fits into your life may be 1 to 2 times per week. But I promise you, if you're getting into the habit of like having that evening beer or that evening glass of wine and it's happening on a regular basis as part of your routine, you're in trouble. But if it's
Right.
like once or twice a week and you're having 3 drinks, 1 to 3 drinks or whatever, and it's more of an episodic thing, that's okay. If you're having it daily, you're using it as a way to cope with stress as a pressure release valve. And I'm telling you, there are better ones on an ongoing basis. And what happens metabolically speaking, we drink alcohol, our body perceives alcohol as a metabolic toxin, and the liver does get to work by breaking that down. And alcohol does have calories, right? 7 calories per gram, but it doesn't mean that those alcohol calories are stored. They're just preferentially burned. And so when you drink and eat at the same time, it kind of causes like a not a great metabolic scenario in your liver where you're
Mm.
oxidizing a lot of the alcohol and you're not going to be oxidizing a lot of the nutrients that you would otherwise when you eat.
Right.
So like beware of like having a shit ton of pizza while you're having those beers. And
Right.
I guess then I think the other thing that seems relevant in my life, but probably many of us, certain alcohols make us feel better than others. Like certain people drink wine and they find like they have histamine responses. Certain people have beer and it makes them more bloated. Other
Yeah.
people can tolerate certain kinds of things. So like find the spirit or the alcohol that really tends to work for you. And if you're drinking the heavier beers or like the really sugary cocktails, like it's detrimental. But if you're having a tequila drink or something like this, or just a glass of wine once in a while, like it's totally fine. I wouldn't go and
Mhm.
micromanage that. I think it's an episodic, not a regular thing.
Right. Yeah. I've kind of been waiting for that to come true. This idea that like a glass of wine a day is good for you or is inert and doesn't affect your system, because it's just not what I've noticed in my life and the people around me.
Mm-hmm.
I have family who go through phases where there's more wine being drunk, like there's a glass of wine or two every night being drunk
Yep.
versus scaling back. And I notice when the wine is happening, there is a progressive weight gain, but also like just a sense of ill health
Yes.
compared to when there's no wine being drunk. And I think your point around really paying attention to your body and finding what works for you is so important. This is very important in the coffee conversation,
Yeah.
because we know now that there's genes expressed that in each person that will either allow them to metabolize coffee better or not. And
Mm-hmm.
unless you go and get your genes tested, it's up to you to just see how your body responds to coffee and try drinking coffee in different ways. Try having it before breakfast. Try having it only after breakfast.
Yep.
Try having it with some fat blended into
Yep.
it. Try different beans. Try dark roast.
Yep.
Try medium roast. Try espresso. Try medium roast. See how your body feels when you're on each of those things so that you can narrow down what actually works for you and make it work. For me, it's coffee only after I eat food. So I just
Mm-hmm.
have some green tea while I'm in that fasted state.
Yep.
Uh, French press, blend it with fat,
Mm-hmm.
and always medium roast. Never ever dark roast. And there's even some companies that say they're medium roast, but you can smell it. It smells totally burnt.
Mm-hmm.
Starbucks particularly, but there's all these other big companies that do the same. They double roast their stuff, like
Mm-hmm.
lightly roasted coffee works best for me. It just kind of like flows through me like tea,
Yep.
and I feel the energy and there's no consequence.
Yeah.
Whereas like some of the stuff I used to drink at the office when I was working other jobs or etc., instantly had a response in my body. Had to go to the bathroom and just like felt sick to my stomach. It was just like these gut burning, super dark.
Yep.
So I got a sense of what didn't work for me and what does work for me. And I think that's important.
I think what you just described is at the heart, at least on the ingestion nutrition side of things, that we all must figure out is our like go-to baseline, our best things, our best in class desserts, the foods that make us feel well. And the signs to pay attention to outside of like genetic testing is exactly what you described. One, does this thing that I just consumed cause some kind of GI issue? So it's either frank GI pain, which can happen immediately, or problems with our poop or
Right.
bloating. And that's more going to be on like the starchy carbohydrates. I guarantee people listening to this right now are eating some kind of starchy carbohydrate that just does not agree with them well, that if removed would cause like far less bloat and pain. And the other thing is actually histamine. Like when our bodies perceive something, our immune system perceives something that it doesn't want in there, it's going to release histamine, which is going
Mm-hmm.
to cause more blood flow to those areas. It's also going to increase mucus production. That's
Mm-hmm.
our body's response to something it perceives as foreign. This could be pollen in the air, which I know you're experiencing right now in Canada, but this also could be food allergens in our GI tract, right? So if you're eating a food and it makes you will feel like you need to clear your throat, or you got a stuffy nose afterwards, your body is having some kind of reaction to it, and you're going to be better off without that. And
Uh-huh.
these small distinctions, like they don't happen overnight, but when you find them, it's going to help you guide into a plan. And that requires paying more attention too. And then you're going to find too that when you get these things out of your body, you become a lot more clean and sensitive. And when you reintroduce them, you're like, holy shit. Like,
Yeah.
I can't believe I just like that's what happens when I eat corn. Oh man. And so it's like getting rid of all that static for a period is part of the healing process.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, great conversation on diet. And I want to leave plenty of time here to talk about circadian rhythm because I
Yeah.
know that's big in the conversation right now. Huberman really kicked it off, I think, for a
Mhm.
lot of people. And I think this is an important piece for so many people to hear, is that light is so important and that the timing of light. I feel like the red light thing, the blue light coming from your screens really hit the mainstream a few years ago. But this sunlight piece being really important in the morning and kicking off the circadian rhythm is key. So I'd love to hear what you have to say about that.
Perfect. Well, let's
Yeah.
just talk about like light period and like and what our true our what our experience of reality is collectively as humans. Like all life on this planet is contingent upon the fact that we have this giant sun that's kicking off all of this energy that then the plants receive, the human body receives, and we do all sorts of things from it. And like we know plants need the light, and that helps with all the photosynthesis to cellular respiration as well. And we need the same exact thing. And now the light that comes from the sun, when we just say light, is actually just a part of an electromagnetic spectrum of wavelengths, like
Mhm.
how short or long the wavelength is. About half of it is visible light, which is the light that's reflected off objects that we see. About, I'd say around 40% of it is infrared light, which is lower than red. So red is the longest wavelength we can see. So it's like the loopiest of the waves. And like violet is the shortest wavelength we can see. So we hear about ultraviolet, that's slightly above violet. We hear about
Right.
infrared, that's slightly below red. And I think it's important for us to understand this because like the light from the sun is a mixture of these things. And the light from the sun also changes throughout the day. In the morning, when the sun is like lower on the horizon and it's actually there's light has to go through more of our atmosphere, there's basically no UV radiation that hits
Right.
us at this time. So
Right.
morning sunshine early in the day, we're getting a lot of the infrared, we're getting some of the visible light, but we're not getting the UV. So like if you're worried about skin cancer and skin aging, like the UV is going to be part of the problem. Morning sunshine's like uniquely good for getting that. Now,
Mm.
when our eyes perceive light, this really changes our whole neurochemistry. At night, we've heard about the whole melatonin thing, right? The sun goes down, there's less light that's perceived by the brain and the eyes, and then we can produce melatonin, which gives us all these benefits, anti-inflammatory, restorative, kicks off this whole resting rhythm that's so good for us. But in the morning is the other time that you got to get the light input into our eyes. So like I like to get sunshine into my eyes. I have contact lenses that block UV, so I make sure that I'm outside without the contacts, with glasses
Mm.
in, and just getting some light filtering into my eyes 5-10 minutes. And ideally, if you can get that full body sun exposure where you're getting some of this infrared light that's hitting your skin, what they found is the infrared exposure earlier in the day actually preps your skin to tolerate UV later in the day. It's like, go figure. We're completely entrained to this whole sun cycle. And all the vitamin D thing is actually interesting too, because we hear about the sunshine and vitamin D connection. Vitamin D is only created by UVB light. And UVB light only happens in like the middle part of the day when the sun is very high. That's when we get exposure. So the light that can burn you is also the light that can produce vitamin D. So
Uh-huh.
that's, I think, a relevant discussion, especially for our friends up there in Canada, far north, when you don't
Yeah.
always have like the sun all the time. You know, sometimes it's supplementing with vitamin D is good, even if you're getting sunshine. There's so much more to sun than just like the vitamin D story. But I guess like the circadian rhythm means being trained during the light cycle. And then at night, you actually want to have like the lower light. We all heard the story. Now, when we look up at the sky and we see that the sky is blue, the reason the sky is blue is because the blue spectrum of light that comes as a context of the white light that the sun emits is being basically reflected and scattered throughout all the oxygen, hydrogen, helium, nitrogen molecules. So we perceive blue because blue light's scattered. What does this tell you? Well, blue light is not just bad, it's actually energizing. It's actually the light that we
Right.
perceive in the middle of the day that can give us more alertness, increases reaction time, increases focus. So there's a good amount of blue light. And like all things in health and fitness, first things get, put in a category in a box as good or bad. And then we figure out, oh, it's a little more complicated than that. And that's the blue light story, right? Blue light can have benefits,
Yeah.
but where we're at right now is we have non-natural sources of blue light from our screens and our phones that are blasting us at all times. And the action item is someone is listening to this literally in 2023, and you do not have some kind of blue light filter on your technology at night, like the night shift setting or some kind of app on your computer or your TV or glasses, at least, you got to get that in the back part of your day, because it is going to screw up your circadian rhythm to be exposed to the light. When the sun's down, there's not supposed to be blue light. Don't be blasting yourself with blue light. So
Right.
I guess that's like the short of it. It's really not that complicated, but it's about aligning yourself to the natural rhythm that is set by the sun and just kind of like natural law.
Yeah. I also noticed that there's different spectrums of light bulbs. And I really noticed this when I was living in
Yeah.
an apartment building, and I could look across the other apartment building and I could see the spectrum of lights that different people had in their apartments. And some people's apartments, it was bright as day in
Yeah.
there. And other people had we had salt lamps, hue
Yes.
lights, everything on the red spectrum.
Yes.
But um, one of my questions is, I see these biohacker dudes using red glasses like basically all day. And I always wonder, like, wait a minute, why are you trying to block the blue light all day long?
Right. I
Does
agree
that
with you.
make sense to you? Okay.
It does not make sense to me
Okay.
whatsoever. Like you want to be entrained to the spectrum of light that's relevant to that time of the day. But I think, and I want to loop back to what you said was very true, because that is an action item for people. Like if you have lights that are very bright or kicking off that full spectrum white, and you can switch those out for ones that are more in those yellow, red tones, they're not quite as bright. Like that's the better baseline light to have in your house, because
Right.
when you turn them on at night and you actually need them and you don't have sunlight coming in, that's
Yeah.
the light that you're going to want. And
Yeah.
so that's good.
That's a good way to do it. Yeah. The other thing that we do is we actually get one of those actual red heat lamps,
Yeah.
or if the ceiling thing, if it's not a pot light in the ceiling, I got sort of regular sized light bulbs that were red, and
Yeah.
we made it so that there's two switches in the bathroom. There's the vanity lights that are,
Nice.
they're still kind of orange in tone. They're not the
Mhm.
super whiteys, but the top light on the ceiling is a red light. So in
Yeah.
the middle of the night, we use that one if we need to,
Nice.
and we also have like a salt lamp nightlight type thing. And we try to just, as soon as the sun's down, it's only red or orange lights in the house,
So
which
good.
is
And
super helpful.
that is, we're going to find out, I think, when science progresses more and we see the impacts, people are going to consider being entrained to proper light patterns almost as foundational as nutrition and exercise.
Mm.
Like it's that important. And we are so
Mm.
off the ball right now. So it's really cool to hear that your family's this dialed in.
So you recommend getting outside, getting light into your eyeballs and onto your skin early in the morning. For me, this time of year, that's easy. In the winter, it's harder. Like where I am, I'm at, about the 49th parallel.
Yeah.
And man, in December and January, the sun feels so far away. It's just barely on the horizon. And
Yeah.
sometimes down at the barn here, I can feel it. I can see it squeaking through the trees. And I go out and stand there and just try to get some sun in the face at 10 a.m.
Yeah.
And we have a red light machine. And
Yep.
so I'm curious what your thoughts are, on, like, should we use the red light machine
Heck
early
yeah.
in the day for that reason?
Yep.
And B, what's the best thing people can do? Most Canadians actually are right near this 49th
Yes.
parallel.
For sure. And I think you need to use technology is those are harsher places for people to live, especially during the winter time. I mean, it's
Mhm.
like it's a lot easier to live in Jamaica during the winter than it is up where
Yeah.
you live. And by the very nature of that, you do need to have stuff in place. So, like, I think getting a red light sometime early in the morning, doing the best you can when the sun is up and you have some of that midday light to like look at that and get a little bit of exposure. And then maybe even use the red light again at night, because the sunset, which we didn't explicitly talk about, also kicks off those red, orange, like lower frequencies that are beneficial. So you just got
Mhm.
to do a little work to use technology, and then also supplement with vitamin D. Like, I think seasonally, that's a time to increase your vitamin D3 intake through food and supplemental form, because you're not going
Mhm.
to get as much. And like many
Mhm.
people have said, and I don't know if this, I'll say this is absolutely true, but they say that we don't have flu season. We have low vitamin D3 season. And
Uh-huh.
like, and it's partly true because all of our immune cells have D3 receptors, and that helps them, like, basically it's an immune modulator. And so any way we can get that. So I would, wintertime, increase your D3, get some kind of light therapies in the house, especially for our kids too, like get them exposed as well. And that's just what you have to do if you live up in the north.
Right. So there is kind of this, we've mentioned this a few times. There is seasonal cycles, and it makes
Yes.
sense for us to cycle with the seasons. I read a book, which I'm sure you've read, called The Four Seasons Solution, which
Hmm.
that guy was extreme, and that's why he wrote a book about it.
Yeah.
But even just the overarching theme of that book, I think, was really useful. Is like, hey, maybe there's exercises that you should
Yeah.
be doing more in the summer
Yeah.
versus exercises you should be doing in the depth of winter. Maybe
Yep.
there's foods that you could be eating more in the summer that make more sense, that your body's going to just respond better to in the middle of July versus the middle of January. Maybe there's, more hearty foods that you could eat in the winter.
Yes.
And it makes a lot of sense to me. And I I can't tell you how many guys I know who have historically suffered from uh, mild depression or major depression
Hmm.
in January, February, and March because of this. Just the effects
It's
of what it's
It's
like to live up here.
neurochemistry.
Hmm.
It's neurochemistry. Like,
Hmm.
if we could change the neurochemical soup that your brain is being bathed in, light being one of those main factors, as well as nutritional factors and movement. When you're moving less, you're not getting light. And oftentimes that means people are staying indoors. And because they're depressed, they're turning to heavier amounts of drinking, like in other ways to like balance the brain chemistry. Like, of course, it's a reason for a lot of problems. And I also want to go back quickly. I don't want to stay here too long, but to talk about the seasonal eating, like during a time when it says really cold, you're living in Canada and you're not getting out as much to exercise, it is a good idea to eat a higher fat, more keto, more bone broths, more organ meats, less sugary fruits during that period of time. Whereas maybe when it is the summer and you're out, you're kayaking, you're hiking, you're running, you're training outside, like you can get away with eating more fruits because, they have more
Hmm.
glucose to
Hmm.
meet the demands of like more outdoor exercise. And vitamin D and the light changes that happen seasonally also change how we process carbohydrates as well. So
Right.
it's all connected. It's and that's the beauty of it, and perhaps also the challenge.
Yeah. That, it's always changing. You got to be paying attention. Advice for people, perhaps in my neck of the woods, further north, on vitamin D dosage, whether to take K2 with
Hmm.
it, and maybe even the form that
Yeah,
you
I'd
take it
say
in.
for sure. So like I'd say like vitamin D3 ranges, it's going to be kind of individual how much taking a D3 supplement affects someone, but like you can take a shit ton of vitamin D for a long time and not reach toxicity. Like there's people who've taken 25 to 50,000 IUs per day for extended periods of
Yeah.
time. So
Yeah.
like I wouldn't be afraid of like the safe blanket, like throughout the winter 5,000 IU dose through supplement form is like, I feel very confident that that's going to just help people, not hurt you. And I do think the K2 is good to take. Like, I mean, maybe it's like for every 2,500 IUs of D3, you have 100 micrograms of K2. Some people might even say 100 micrograms of K2 for 1,000 IUs. But if you're even just aware that you should be taking K2 with D3, you're in the game. And I think
Right.
even getting 100 micrograms per day of the K2 is great. They have a lot of combination supplements that are good. And also, if you eat fermented
Hmm.
foods, some of these do have the K2 in them as
Hmm.
well, or those organ meats as well. Those organ meats do have a good amount of K2 as well as butter and stuff like that.
Right.
But when I'm supplementing with D3, which is typically times that is not when I'm not getting a lot of sunshine, more the winter seasonally, I'll probably get 100 to 300 micrograms of K2 with about 5,000 IUs of D3.
Hmm.
And I'm sure there's more of an exact science, but just the fact that you take it, I think is good enough in my book.
Hmm. Okay. That's good advice. I actually found a supplement that gives you 50,000 IUs in one pill, and I take it once a week in the winter
Cool.
with some K2. Is that
That's
crazy or
no, it also works well. I think there's
okay?
also like single dosing kind of things,
Right.
either injection or oral. That's super cool. And
Yeah.
what I found, this is something we learned in naturopathic medical school, is like when you're getting acutely sick, it is also a fine time to mega dose D3 up to the 50,000 IU mark. And vitamin A is another very powerful immune modulator around all of your key mucosal membranes. So those two things, short term mega dosing, can be helpful.
Okay. So I can't believe we are almost at the hour. What's your trajectory? How old are you right now?
I'm about to be 34.
Right. Yeah. So you're 5 years younger than me. Um, what's your plan? 40, 50, 60, 70? How are you changing your diet? Are you just like straight lining the way you're doing things now? What's your plan? And how old do you want to get to?
Mm-hmm.
What's your target?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because like on that last question, I think for me that longevity is going to be a byproduct of doing the things we talked about today, just like living as best we can in accordance with these like right living principles, maintaining mobility and like and quite frankly, because I'm kind of leading a movement of guys like 40 plus who are looking to like maximize that, I want to be a walking living example of leadership. So there's added oomph to why I stay on my routines, because I'm a walking message in a sense.
Yeah.
Um, I want to age well. I think it's kind of cool and poetic, and this may come into some of my spirituality, that we do have these bodies that go through a trajectory of like growth and then decay, like the sine wave that goes up and then it comes back down. And I guess I just want to be able to do awesome stuff like hike, rock climb, play pickleball, lift weights when I'm 70, 80 and beyond, and then age with grace. And with grace
Yeah.
means without chronic underlying health issues that are wrecking me, but just like
Mm-hmm.
I'm okay with the idea that there's going to be a point where my body slows down. I'm okay with the point where my skin's going to get a little saggier and there might be a little pooch on my belly that I can't get away with as much. And that might be different than some people who are biohacking for the idea that they want to really try to live forever and maximize like as much youthful appearance. I guess I'm kind of like accepting of the natural trajectory of like I will return back into the earth, this physical body. And so like
Yeah.
that's kind of like my personal ethos. But it's going to be a byproduct of right living, which again starts with the foundations of daily movement, circadian rhythm, high intensity exercise, and a good, healthy diet.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the practice of doing all those things together is gives me energy to go help and serve. And I'll say this too. I know we didn't get into this, but I've also, due to some ego based decisions in my 20s, I created tremendous damage to my body through like breaking bones and getting into bad accidents that I'm still healing and dealing with the effects of. And if anyone else here has a chronic long-term physical injury, then they can probably relate and understand that on some level.
Yeah.
So what I am interested in the fact is the body can regenerate. I'm playing around with different kinds of stem cell therapies, peptides, and other things. So like I'd like to be 70 and 80 without like problems in my joints and
Mm-hmm.
just be nice and flexible and not have pain. And that's still like a working journey and process, but with enough time and focus, like this body can heal.
Yeah. Yeah, you kind of answered my other questions, which were basically, do you think we're going to crack the code on immortality, and would you take the pill? Would you take the gene therapy if it meant that you could live to 200? What's your stance on those things?
Well, maybe. Like, I think I can't say a hard no, but I can't say a hard yes either. Like, I do think we're making massive strides, right? I mean, we just figure out how to like repair DNA, reduce cellular effects of like aging and damage, through nutritional therapies. It's going to be certainly some gene therapies. To have the opportunity to experience that, if that's something someone's interested in, it requires like right living today. Like
Right.
there's a reason why like the wealthiest people on the planet right now who have access to potentially everything they could, they still look old as shit. Like they still look like, if you're 80, like Warren Buffett doesn't look like he's 50, right? And he probably
Yeah.
wants to be around. So, I mean, like
Yeah.
my point of sharing that is that I think the basis of even being able to experience those things as they come is going to be still set up on the foundation of right living. I don't see the fact that you're going to be able to just like eat crap processed foods, have toxic environment, and then go ahead and just like take some external thing and it's going to solve it. But I do think there's things that are going to enhance the function of mitochondria, repair DNA, heal old chronic injuries, regenerate tissues and stuff like that. But I also think we're going to find unintended consequences from these things as well. It's like Icarus flying too close to the sun kind of analogy. I think the things that create immortality in cells are also the same kinds of things that cancer cells express.
Yeah.
I think, you know, the things that you get it, a lot of the therapies that we do take have unintended consequences, and our bodies like uses a finite number of like molecules and signals to create like not infinite, but a very vast symphony. And like just pulling on one lever and thinking it only does one thing is a little bit foolish.
Yeah. Like the more we tinker and the more crazy technological it gets, the higher the risk that there's an unintended consequence right away or further down the road.
Okay, I want to say one more thing, and it won't be today because I know we're wrapping up because of time. But like, if you'd like to have me back on to put on a nice old tinfoil hat in the future, I would love to talk about the effects of EMF and how we're moving into a more electrified world right now, which is a big. We are electric beings, as we talked about with the mineral discussion earlier. And I personally believe, from my deep dive of the research, and Ben, I'll send this documented presentation to you offline so you can check it out as well.
Yeah, please.
That we're moving into a massively and rapidly changing world right now with the broadcasting of different microwaves, radio waves, et cetera, that has biological impacts. And as we're pushing the bounds of technology and telecom, the Internet of Things, everything's talking to each other, these have known biological effects. And I think we're going to have to come to a reckoning of that. I don't know how it's going to figure out. Are we going to genetically modify humans so they're more resistant to non-native EMF fields? Like maybe, but like that's a conversation that not enough people are having right now. And it's like pretty foundational in my opinion.
There's definitely this like hockey stick curve of EMF occurring, right? It started with Wi-Fi, and then, you know, Bluetooth passing through our bodies, and we've got 5G now, which is it's like ultra powerful cell signals, and then we've got Starlink booting up at the moment.
Low-level satellites broadcasting it everywhere.
Yeah, so I would like to talk about that. So let's bookmark that one, and comment, folks. Send comments if you're interested in that conversation. But as always, thank you, Dr. Balduzzi, for joining me to talk about health and just to jam out on this. I don't actually get into the physical health components very much on my show, and but it's something I'm really passionate about. So appreciate you reaching out and taking the time to come and chat with me.
Likewise, bros. Thanks so much.
Okay, folks, we will leave all relevant links in the show notes. This is broadcast on all audio channels as well as YouTube. So if you're on a channel where you can like and subscribe, please do that and leave comments and engage. And please, if there was someone that you were thinking about while listening to this episode, please send it to them and just spread the message. So thanks, folks. And until next time, bye.